Now let's get some inside secrets from the USA, the Netherlands, and the UK on the union organizing experience in a live discussion. This panel is for all the unionists who feel that we know what we want, but wonder how to get there. Speakers will be discussing a new approach to organizing. In this session, we will discuss a union organizer, researcher, author of Shortcuts and the Collective Bargain from the United States of America, Jane McAlevey, National Learning Officer and Organizer of the National Education Union from the United Kingdom, John Hegerty, and the Vice President of the AOB from the Netherlands, Jelmer.
Thank you. My name is Jelmer, and I'm really looking forward to this panel. I'm actually in the panel with two of my teachers, Jane McAlevey and John Hegerty. I've been following their course, and tomorrow I'm going to listen to them again in International Strike School, but Jane is going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. So I just want to frame this discussion. I'm coming from the classroom, a teacher, now being vice president of the AOB, but still in the classroom. I've been looking for ways and being really frustrated, not sort of like getting my colleagues to come along, to organize, to become a member, to become active, and to organize in school and nationally. And I've been sort of like writing books and blogs and all these other things, and I think I've done some organizing. And as I looked outwards more and more to other unions, and for example the NEU, but also what's happening in America, I figured, hey, we haven't really touched upon, so we know what a good education system looked like, we know what good teaching looked like, public education, trust, well-funded, all those kind of things. But we never really discuss how teachers are organizing. There's not a lot of research done on it. So when I read a book, I think it was 2-3 years ago, it was called No Shortcuts, Organizing for Power in a New Gilded Age. It was sort of like an eye-opener, an epiphany I had. I said, okay, this is sort of like the language, the tools, the research that we need. And it was a book by Jane McAlevey, a union organizer, coming from her practice, but also her research. So for me, it was really a life-changing book. It was something I've been looking for a long time. And the distinction between organizing and mobilizing, I think, is a really important one. So what I first wanted to ask is Jane sort of like to delve into that and then go into sort of like the NEU's practice and get John into the conversation as well. So, but first of all, Jane, I'd like to ask you, so what is organizing? Can you explain the core concept to us?
Yeah, I can definitely explain it. And it's great to be here with you two today, Jelmer and John, and happy celebration of Teachers Day. I think for starters, we can pick up on where Jane Goodall left us just a few minutes ago, actually. Jane Goodall herself actually said, apathy will be the end of us. So picking right up on her, I want to describe what organizing is as very distinct from what we think of as either activism or mobilizing. And for me, the best way to do that is actually to illustrate it with just a couple of slides. So I'm going to show some slides right now and see if I can quickly get the screen share to work very easily. There we go. So Jelmer mentioned that we're in strike school together. I want to just show 3 or 4 slides here. The first is a picture of what looks like the Hong Kong umbrella protest. It's actually a 34,000 teacher strike in Los Angeles, California in January of 2019. This was a strike that, like the Chicago teacher strike, was sort of a defining moment in rebuilding power in teacher unionism in the United States. So how did the Los Angeles teachers have a 100% out strike over the central questions of how to make quality education real again in a city dominated by a lot of poor people? That were the central issues in the strike for the teachers. And one thing we talk a lot about that's going to get to what's organizing versus mobilizing in a handful of slides is something called structure tests. And I just want to throw these out there very quickly. The United Teachers of Los Angeles did a lot of what we call structure tests before they knew, it gets to the heart of organizing, before they knew that they were ready and able to call that strike. They did not wake up one day angry and upset and say, hey, let's just have a strike and walk off the job. In fact, they did, and I outlined in my newest book, A Collective Bargain, they did 12 what we call structure tests to know that their rank and file members, all 34,000, were united in solidarity and ready to walk off the job. And I want to just walk you through about 4 more slides and then leave screen share. Essentially what we're focusing on and what I teach and practice is how do you build a strong, effective worksite structure. In your case, this means how do you build a strong, effective, school site structure.
Jane, they asked you if you can just share your PowerPoint. You shared your main screen, and we saw like your whole screen also with the PowerPoint. Just
Okay.
justification.
I'll forget it. I'll just stop sharing then. That doesn't make any sense. So essentially, though, what I showed was a picture of 34,000 teachers walking out, and a beautiful picture of 34,000 teachers in Los Angeles walking out. And to get there, they had to practice a mechanism called structure tests. And the structure is the school site. And so what's different between organizing and mobilizing is that in mobilizing, which is what most teachers unions and most unions are doing, whether it's in Europe or around the world, or definitely in the United States, what it mostly means we're doing is we're talking to the teachers who want to talk to us. We're only making an effort. We call a meeting. If we're doing a good job, we call a meeting and people show up at a meeting. And it's never a very high percentage of the members who show up at a meeting because who wants to go to an extra meeting? We generally run not very good meetings and then we rely on who shows up and we blame the people who don't show up, right? We literally say, well, we called a meeting and if those teachers didn't show up to the meeting, too bad. That's actually the opposite of organizing. Organizing means we wake up in the morning and we have a plan, literally, to engage every single teacher into every single school every single week. And it means we're spending most of our time talking to the teachers who do not come to our meetings, are not in our social media feeds, and do not think they want to talk to us. That's the difference between a mobilizing approach or an advocacy approach, either one of them, and what we call a deep organizing approach. In the United States, the biggest strikes, which have led to the biggest improvements in standards for students and learning and teacher outcomes, has been the unions that are practicing the organizing approach, by which they make a plan every single week about how to engage every single teacher in every single school. That's what organizing is. And it's very different than the approach that most teacher unions rely on, which is let's talk to whoever shows up, right? So that's, I think, an opening salvo for what the distinction is between the two.
Yeah, so that's what was my experience coming with the union and also looking at other unions in Europe. So there's also a difference because you talk about bargaining, for example, in hospitals for salaries. But in the Netherlands, for example, and I think in a lot of your other European countries, we have collective bargaining across like the whole country. But there are also a lot of workplace issues and a lot of things that we sort of like have a say on, but we're not really organized around. So what we say to like ordinary teachers, like in the workplace, in the classroom, in the school, does this also apply to them? Because that's what they always ask me.
Yeah, it totally applies to them. In fact, in the organizing model, the people who really do the work are actually rank and file teachers. So what we do and what we're doing in the strike school right now that both Jelmer and John are participating in, what we do is we teach. So first, as educators, right? We're all educators on this call. So as educators, we teach rank and file teacher leaders what are the fundamentals of how you can engage 100% of the teachers school by school by school. Because by the way, you're not going to successfully, even in the European model of sort of sectoral negotiations, in order to have maximum power to win at a table, whether it's a national table, because in the healthcare sector, by the way, in the United States, sadly, that is a private sector, I've done national bargaining, right? The equivalent of sectoral bargaining. When you're good enough in the US and you get enough power across a private sector, you can sort of force them into something like sectoral bargaining. But that only happens when we have the power, in our case, hospital by hospital, in your case, school by school in this case, right? So the ability to win strong national standards starts with what the actions are by every teacher at the most local level, school by school, whether that's to resolve school site issues or whether that's to bring more power to a national strike or a national discussion about educational policy. We have to be able to involve every single teacher in those discussions to make the concepts real that we're fighting for.
Exactly, and that's sort of like what I'm also trying to get going to John. So not third partying the union. The union is not a third party. It's sort of like it's your collective voice within the school and also within your country. So John, we've had this talk before, and we sort of like discussing where you are with the NEU at the moment, and you've been sort of like applying some of these lessons. So where are you at the moment with this? And maybe you can also say a little bit on your COVID response, because I was very impressed by that.
Sure. So I think that the real starting point is that where we are in terms of organising is we're 10 years into a project. This stuff doesn't happen overnight. Our organising strategy as the National Union has gone on for a long time, and it's involved building rep structures, building training, recruiting activists over years. But in terms of what we did during COVID, it did build on that organising legacy. And I suppose there were some digital tools that we used. We used a lot of Zoom meetings. At one point, we had 20,000 members on a Zoom call. We used Call Hub as a technology. With one of our aims was to phone every single one of our workplace reps. So that's 10,000 reps. We got through to nearly 4,000 and spoke to them. And one of the things that we were asking our reps to do was to meet with members, gather a petition as to people's opposition to wider reopening, and take that to the school management, which was a structure test, because one of the things that was happening was reps were then coming back to us and saying, not everybody wants to sign it. What do I do? And we were then using those models that James talked about. We were saying, okay, you're going to have to talk to the people who aren't on our side. This is how we do it. This is a structured organising conversation. What you're doing is a structure test. You're going to build power. And the result of that work over the last few months of the crisis is we've recruited 50,000 new members. We've recruited 3,500 new workplace reps. We've trained over 3,500 activists in a variety of health and safety and organising strategies. And the union, when it came to the government's demand for wider reopening, we managed to stop 70% of schools opening more widely. So the organising work that we do has an outcome. It's not, we don't organise for the sake of it. We build workplace power in order to keep our members safe, or in order to win things at workplace level, because in England we don't have national bargaining, so we have to win workplace power.
Yeah. So, and I think the way in what you said, like it's a long-term project, and when I talk, when we have this message, this global message, that we sort of like also say to people, the LA teachers took 4 years when Chicago did it, like in 2009. They also took 3 years to build power, to build those kind of structures. That is a long-term commitment. It's not just you snap your fingers and then like 100,000 Dutch teachers show up for a one-day strike. Maybe that can happen, but it's not really building power. And I think that's the big difference.
And also, we made mistakes. All the way through this process, we got things wrong. And I think it's important for us to always keep reflecting on the work that you do, to go, okay, that didn't go as well. How do we do it better next time? Rather than, resting on your laurels. You have to accept that you've got to take chances. You've got to take risks in order to win. And sometimes they don't work, and that's okay.
Yeah. And Jane, so we're in the middle of an unprecedented crisis, the COVID pandemic. So what's your perspective on it? So is the work that you're doing and that John's doing, is it making a difference, or do we need to step up even more? So where are we and where are we going and what is needed?
I think both are true. In the immediate, our work is definitely adding up. In the United States, all of the same unions that have built to what we call high participation unions that we call strike-ready unions, meaning they've got 100% worker engagement. There's a rep for every school. There's a communication system that's clear. That is why, in fact, in July, in the state of California, where I'm focused working with a team of unions in California, including the Los Angeles teachers, the reason why the governor, the elected governor of the state of California, made a fairly early announcement in July that in fact schools would not open was not because the governor had a warm spot for teachers that day. It's because we had begun taking strike votes across some of the biggest unions and saying there are not COVID protections in place. There is not personal protective equipment. We, in most of the big cities in the United States, because of austerity, don't have functioning ventilators, don't have air conditioning, don't have heaters, don't have windows that open. And don't even have like running water, and clean soap in half the buildings. So when someone says, oh yeah, we can open, we'll just socially distance and keep, kids 10 feet from the students' desks, the teacher said, this is insanity, and began to announce that they were taking strike votes. And very quickly, the governor of the state decided, okay, we're probably not going to open right away. And that was a good start. But by the way, where we're going is we need a hell of a lot of money, because austerity has just decimated the public education system in the United States. And we are in a fight right now on election day in the United States. We may not yet know who the president will be, but on election day in the state of California, I urge every teacher union in the world to pay attention. We are running a ballot initiative to tax corporations, to force them to put money into the education system. And it's high stakes right now in California. And that's our day-to-day work, is taking the same worksite structures that we built for strikes and pouring it into the electoral system to tax corporations, to force them to pay for the education that students of the future will need. So that's the immediate. And then fighting austerity coming out of COVID is going to be a massive fight. And it's not going to happen because teachers are going to nicely ask for more money. We have to tax corporations and the super rich to refund the public education system.
I completely agree. But that's sort of like, it's not as clear cuts in Europe, but I think that fight is coming, and it's coming out of 2008, at least in the Netherlands and also a lot of other European countries. Austerity also took a big cut out of education, did a lot of damage. So, John, also to wrap up for you, I'm going back to you. One more question for you, Jane. What's next for the NEU, and where are you in the UK?
I wanted to pick up on something that Jane was mentioning, that idea that it's really important for us as teacher unions, and this is something that Andrea Schleicher was talking about a few minutes ago. It's really important for us to put forward that alternative narrative to the current narrative around education and around public services. The crisis of COVID shows us the impact of child poverty, the impact of 10 years of austerity and school unfunding. That's why things have been so bad. And then you look at the exams crisis that we had in this country, and that's caused by the massive over-testing and over-assessing and reductive nature of the school curriculum. So one of the things that we've been talking about now is moving forward from the health and safety focus that we've obviously had over the last few months to both empowering our workplace representatives to begin to bargain about other issues, to look at a year's timetable. So at the moment, we're asking them to bargain around pay. After Christmas, we're asking them to bargain around appraisal. And then come the summer, we're asking them to bargain around workload. So there's a national strategy around bargaining. But also, we're beginning to stress the importance of an alternative narrative around education, a different way of teaching and learning, a different way of funding education. And we've put forward a national recovery plan for education to say these are the things that the government should be focusing on. And it's not just about trying to win that now, it's about beginning to create that narrative over the next few years to say this is how education should be, to build that broader social movement.
Thanks, John. So I think we need to wrap up. So I'm just going to ask Jane maybe one more last comment, and maybe sort of like a call to everybody that they can join Strike School or the next Strike School.
Yeah, well, one, definitely pay attention to Jelmer and John are both involved in Strike School that we're teaching through the Luxembourg Stiftung in Germany. We're definitely going to be focusing more on both how do we improve the collective bargaining practice to get to some of the issues that John was just mentioning. And how do we tie our work? I would say the last crucial thing is we have not made any of the victories we have in the United States in either Chicago or Los Angeles or Oakland or around the country without having deep engagement, not just with every teacher, but with parents and students and the broader community. And that is the forward focus for how we actually make radical improvements to public education again.
Yeah, great. Bargaining for the common good. That's what it's called, right? So thank you so much for joining us and for your always grace with your time. And I hope every teacher picks this up. If you're not part of a union, join one. If you are part of a union, become active in it. Don't third party the union. The union is your voice. Organize, get your colleagues in, and that's how you build power, and that's kind of how we can build the education systems that our students deserve. So thank you very much for joining us here, and let's go on to the next session.